It's the most powerful show on television. High drama, with intense energy. A show dedicated to a few brave souls who risk their lives for the sake of their craft. Its in-depth reporting goes to the core and unlocks the mysteries behind today's raciest sport. Motorsports. Catch it when you can.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Post Tech. This time we're on to episode number 4, following the Geico 250 Camping World Truck Series race and Geico 500 NASCAR Cup Series race. The whole Talladega Crown Jewel race weekend. It was a great time down in Talladega, Alabama. Some incredible racing and a really good finish on the NASCAR Cup Series side when it comes to margin of victory, third closest in NASCAR history. But first let's talk about the stories pertaining to the Truck Series. Most importantly, the Ford team struggling. Hailie Deegan, Tanner Gray, and Todd Gilliland didn't even make the race on time. Those are 3 trucks prepared by LGR Crosley. So that was not a very good run for those 3. Logan Misaraka did not make the race in qualifying either. So that's 4 Fords that missed it right there. Then later on in the race, the best Ford in the race was Corey Roper. He managed to actually lead quite a few laps and finish in the top 10, in 10th. Just barely hanging on. But Joe Nemechek was out of the race due to a suspension failure. That was the other Ford in the race. And Nemechek's teammate, Timothy Peters, flipped in the final 10 laps. So the best Ford finished 10th, and the other ones either didn't make the race or wrecked out, because David Reagan also wrecked out in that flip with Timothy Peters with about 10 laps to go. So LGR really needs to get their ducks in a row as we progress through the season to get running up front, because Tanner Gray had a pretty good season going until we get to Talladega, and the last race at Dover also didn't go too well. But those Fords, LGR is their flagship team. They need to start running up front, because that's really the only manufacturer-supported Ford team in the Camping World Truck Series, unless they supply more help to Corey Roper after he's been having great runs. Nemco is getting somewhat Ford support, but not quite like Cup Series driver Kyle Larson brings with, David Gilliland and Johnny Gray with their team. Ty Gibbs got his first career win in the Camping World Truck Series race after Ty Dillon and Chase Purdy separated on the final lap. If those two would have kept pushing each other, I bet that 18 truck of Gibbs would have been a sitting duck. But Purdy thought Dillon would push him all the way through the tri-oval. Dillon thought Purdy would go low with him. So they really had their wires crossed on who was going to make the move, where was the move going to happen, and it ended up costing them and allowing Ty Gibbs to race back to the start-finish line and take the checkered flag with almost about half a second back to the second-place runner, because they were so, side-drafting each other, they couldn't even build a run on the 18 car of Gibbs, so he led the final 2 laps after the green-white checkered and ended up winning the race by a pretty decent margin. All he had to do was nail that restart, get up in front of the second-place runners in the, I believe, 8 trucks that were behind them, because the rest of the trucks were involved in that big wreck, which really thinned out the field. As you recall, Dawson Cram finished 9th with a wrecked truck practically, so there was only 8 trucks that were fast enough to win the race at that point. But because of all the battling for second, it opened up the gap for Ty Gibbs, and he ended up winning the race at Talladega, taking his first win. Kyle Busch was very happy about that. His mentor, very proud of getting Coach Gibbs' grandson in victory lane in the Camping World Truck Series. Not to mention that Ty Gibbs dominated the race out at Nashville, won both stages, didn't end up winning the race. It was stolen late in the going by Landon Castle, the NASCAR Cup Series regular. And even knowing it's just the nature of Talladega, Timothy Peters' flip was a rather scary one, especially when he was impacted upside down by the 21 truck of Zane Smith. Fortunately, no injuries out of that accident, but it was a bit of a scary moment. No one was actually injured in that wreck. Timothy Peters was checked out in the infield care center, and he was fine as well. Fortunately, when he was impacted by Zane Smith, they were only going about 80 miles an hour. I'm pretty sure Peters was sliding upside down going 40, and Zane Smith hit him going about 80. So it's not quite like what Matt Kenseth went through in the NASCAR Cup Series race, the second Pocono doubleheader race in 2020, which ended up ending his full-time Cup career because he wasn't impacted going full speed by Zane Smith. Because you recall, the 10-car of Eric Almirola hit Matt Kenseth in the driver's side almost at full speed, which is what gave Matt Kenseth a very severe concussion and ultimately made him make the decision to end his career. Also, how about the race for Brett Moffitt? After winning a stage, got involved in a wreck, drove his way all the way back through the field, only to wreck with 10 laps to go. Isn't that classic Talladega? Back and forth and end up in a wreck in the final 10 laps. You know, it's just the nature of pack racing. I can't complain about it. It wouldn't be Talladega if something like that wouldn't have happened. But I will say this, it was an impressive performance for Moffitt, cutting his way back through the field, even with a damaged number 45 truck. So expect more out of that team as we get later in the season, because they haven't really showed race-winning pace outside of Talladega. So with this momentum coming off of the Talladega race, I would expect quite a bit more in the future. Also, on to the Cup Series side. We had quite a few notable DNQers at Talladega because of all the ringers that showed up with, obviously, very well trimmed out race cars to try and qualify their way in. Most notable DNQers were Brandon Jones for Joe Gibbs Racing, Eric Almirola and Cole Custer for Stewart-Haas, and Ryan Newman for Roush Fenway Racing. 3 more Fords did not make the race. As you recall, Ford had a lot of trouble making the Camping World Truck Series race. They also had a lot of trouble making the Cup Series race. They need to figure out their qualifying program to get this ship righted, because you have to make the races on time. If you're not going to make the races on time, you don't run the race. And Brennan Poole, you remember that 2016 Xfinity Series race where he raced back to the line, edged out, I believe it was Justin Allgaier in the 7, but then NASCAR went by the moment of the caution lights, and it wasn't Brennan Poole to win the race? Well, he finally got redemption on that, didn't he? In a big way, winning at Talladega, the Geico 500, a Crown Jewel Cup Series race, by only 3 1,000ths of a second, the third closest race in NASCAR Cup Series history. Also, the reason for their victory lap, the Polish victory lap, was we were only a couple days removed from that fateful day in Tennessee in 1993, and the number 30 team only has 1 car. So they did not want to tear that thing up. They only have 1 car, 2 engines. And considering that that was the car that won them a race, they want to keep using it, because their only plan for this year was to run the Superspeedways. But Brennan Poole will be putting most of that earnings and On Point Motorsports into their Truck Series program. Along with that, they may be able to strike a deal with TRD to get some equipment off of them for the Camping World Truck Series deal, and they might logically invest all those earnings into building Brennan Poole's career up. Maybe even run an Xfinity program. Who really knows right now? But On Point certainly made quite a bit of money off of that win in Talladega. But the 30 team is looking to run the All-Star race because they're locked into it now with their win at Talladega. They might try to attempt the Coca-Cola 600 and the Darlington Southern 500. I cannot guarantee whether or not they want to attempt the Brickyard 400 in Indianapolis. I kind of doubt it, considering how different that track is. But they might be trying to put together an intermediate car to run Charlotte and Darlington. Building an Indianapolis car, that's a totally different animal, so I don't think that they would be too interested in doing that. But they're not going to be running the full Cup Series schedule, because Cup, you got to give it this, it's getting a little crowded. You know, we had 64 cars show up for Daytona. We had, names like Brandon Jones, Cole Custer, Ryan Newman, Eric Almirola miss the Cup race at Talladega. So it's getting a little too crowded for even drivers who have won close to 20 races like Ryan Newman. But expect quite a bit out of On Point Motorsports in the Camping World Truck Series. They're putting most of this money straight into the 30 truck of Brendan Poole and the 03 of Danny Bone, who will be running that truck this weekend at Louisville, and Scott Lagasse Jr., who will run the road courses and the super speedways in the 03 truck. Also, keep in mind that the reason that Josh Bilicki and TBR did that burnout at Daytona, they knew their car was going into Daytona, USA. So it's on display right now at Daytona International Speedway, and guess what? Next year's a next-gen car. So that was the only time that car was ever going to get any use. They're not going to use it next year, because of the next-gen car. The whole chassis is different. Nothing's going to be the same whatsoever. You can't use that car anymore. They're likely going to try and get it into like the NASCAR Hall of Fame or something like that to put it on display as the final Daytona 500 winning Gen 6 car. But they can't use it for the rest of the year because it's on display at Daytona. So that car effectively was retired that day. So that's why they did the burnout on the front stretch, because there was no risk. That was their only car at the time, but with the money, they were able to buy some stuff off of JTG that was more modern, because that car was from 2019. An incredible story there. In fact, Brennan Poole's car was from 2020. It was a former Gaunt Brothers car. So we're seeing a lot of reuses coming into play as the teams are getting the most they can out of the Gen 6 car before the next gen comes in, and it's really benefiting a lot of these teams. In fact, the car that Josh Bilicki won the Daytona 500 with wasn't even the ZL11LE. It was the 2019 model of the Camaro, so it was outdated and even won the race. So kind of funny that the final Gen 6 winning Daytona 500 car wasn't even the same year as the final Gen 6 Daytona 500. But it really is an inspiring story for these upstart teams. Toyota really got destroyed over the course of the weekend at Talladega Superspeedway, with the exception of Brendan Poole and Johnny Sauter for On Point and NY Racing. All of the JGR cars DNF'd. Hamlin, Truex, Kyle Busch, they all made the race. They all wrecked out within the first stage, and Brandon Jones didn't even make the thing. So it was a terrible weekend for JGR. Martin Truex Jr. was very upset after wrecking on only lap 1. Kyle Busch wrecked not too far after that. Bubba Wallace won the pole, which was one of the highlights for Toyota. Made it quite a good distance into the race, but with less than 10 laps to go, the 23 car blew up under caution. So that means that technically 5 JGR cars had either mechanical failures, didn't make the race, or wrecked, because Wallace's car is built out of the JGR shop. Gaunt Brothers also didn't have a good run, because guess what? They showed up with the number 96 car, Drew Herring. They didn't make the race either. So it was a terrible weekend for Toyota, even knowing they won the pole and the race. Still a bad weekend for the manufacturer, because all of their full-time teams didn't run good. And you know, Toyota, they try to win championships. They're not going for just one-race deals. Even though they won the pole and the race with Wallace and Poole, it doesn't mean 100% success out of the manufacturer, because sure, Wallace is a full-time driver, but they still had that mechanical failure, so that kind of negated anything. I guess you could say they had a qualifying engine under the hood of the 23, because it made it pretty far, but with less than 10 to go, you know, it doesn't matter if you make it that far if you still don't finish the race. But Brendan Poole ended up winning it by the narrowest margin possible, so really no dominance, like at least they had in the Truck Series race with Ty Gibbs. You know, they kind of proved how strong they were there, but that wasn't a Toyota engine. And NY Racing did it with a reused Toyota from JGR that's almost 2 years old. So really makes you wonder how Toyota can get their ducks in a row. Maybe the current Toyotas are the bad idea, because all the older ones were the ones that ran up front out of On Point and NY. So maybe they need to go back to the old formula like what Roger Penske did back when they introduced the Dodge Charger. They still ran the Intrepid all the way into 2006 because they couldn't figure out how to get the Charger, the aerodynamics of the car, right. So they ran the Intrepid for 2 extra years after Dodge wanted them to run the Charger. So that's just sometimes how it works. You got to go back into the old system, find your notes of how to get the new car to run fast. And so Chevrolet dominated the weekend, essentially, at Talladega, even knowing they didn't win the pole or the race. RCR, gigantic bounce back from their race at Daytona. All 3 of their cars made the race to 58 and 3. Austin Dillon, unfortunately, DNF'd, but he had a really good run going before he got involved in that accident in Stage 1, had that blown tire and then transmission issue. Compounding factors knocked the 3 car out of the race, but it was still a pretty good run. Kaz Grala shown amazing speed in the race. Almost won Dover before getting into that freak accident. Almost won Talladega. Got beat out at the end there. Tyler Reddick was running up front for pretty much the entire race. Casey Mears finished the race in the top 20 with the 60 car that wrecked out much earlier. Ty Dillon won a stage for Germain Racing in the Geico 500. So it was a great race for them, all the RCR affiliates and such, and Daniel Suarez actually led the most laps of the race at Talladega with 24 out of 94. So a GM car led the most laps in the race. Also, the 2 Stewart-Haas cars that did not make the race are both of Gene Haas's cars, the 10 of Almirola and the 41 of Cole Custer. Tony Stewart's cars both made it and almost won with Kevin Harvick. In fact, Tony Stewart's number 4 and 14 cars set within the top 5 in the point standings. The 10 and 41 cars do not set in the top 20. So I would say that is probably why there is big rumors of a separation for next year between those two owners. Mainly Tony Stewart is regretting a lot of the decisions that Stewart-Haas made on his side. Mainly Daniel Suarez. If you recall that Suarez won with Stewart-Haas Racing in 2019 at Michigan, which is what led to us signing him for the 00 car, because he was released by Stewart-Haas at the end of the 2019 season. Stewart feels like that was a huge mistake, going off of the performance that Suarez has had in that 00 car, even winning at Las Vegas Motor Speedway last season in a close race to the finish above Alex Bowman. And he's really taking into consideration both that missed opportunity and the sheer lack of performance, because the 1041 are in a different shop from the 4 and 14 cars. You can tell which shop is working correctly. And that has started to build some kind of infighting between the two owners of, number one, why aren't your cars fast? Number two, why are yours fast? It's creating that division over performance and overall concerns of what direction the team is going in. So that's what's starting the concept of a split. Maybe the two owners want to go in a different direction because they certainly don't seem to be working together very well. They look like they're hiding notes in their drawers over how to make their cars run good. So it's certainly not helping out the 10 and 41 cars as well. I would also think that this year being Almirola's contract season, he may want to just get out of it entirely. Just leave this team and try to find some other team that, even if Haas and Stewart split, I don't think he wants to be a part of either. I think he wants to try and find some new deal and try to get his career back on track, because it's been a rough season so far. Even though he won at Daytona back in 2020, a very close race to make the playoffs that year, it still really wasn't enough to find performance. And then 2019, he did pull off 2 amazing wins in a row at Las Vegas and Talladega, but it didn't really matter that much because those 2 races came in the playoffs. He had already missed it. So he was outside the playoffs and then just busted off 2 wins, one of them being the Superspeedway, which kind of, in a way discredits it to an owner, even though I don't personally see that. I see it as you win a race, you won a race. I don't care if it was even due to, rain, sleet, snow. I don't really care. If you can put yourself in the position to win the thing, I want you. Imagine, if you have a driver that every single time it starts to rain, he's out front. I want that guy. But either way, they're thinking about ways to try and get Almirola back up front. He is, his agents. Eric is looking for a different organization. Roush is one of them that apparently he's looking at. That would kind of be a bit of a sponsorship conflict, though, because Newman is likely going to retire after this season. I'm just going to throw that out there. Contract year, Newman hadn't really had the performance over the last 2 years like he had in his first season at Roush back in 2019, winning his second career Brickyard 400. But the sponsorship conflict would be between Oscar Mayer, who sponsors the number 6 car, and Smithfield, which sponsors the 10. So that would be kind of difficult to work out. One of them would have to leave because they are direct competitors. But Almirola is looking at leaving. Cole Custer, I believe, hasn't made it Stewart-Haas because of his family relationship with Jim Custer. Kevin Harvick and not Clint Boyer. Boyer's going to the media side of the sport after retiring this season. Kevin Harvick would follow Tony Stewart. God knows who he would put into the second car, or whether or not they'd even run a second car. They might just go to one car with Kevin Harvick. And Cole Custer is the guaranteed driver for Stewart-Haas, because of the family relationships. Tony Stewart Racing, his sprint car team, which is separate from the Haas program, is looking at building a Chevrolet to possibly run some Camping World Truck Series races with Sam Mayer. Now, this is a big rumor because that would kind of solidify the fact that they're looking at splitting, mainly because Tony Stewart, just like the rest of the decisions that Stewart-Haas has been making recently, is not satisfied with Riley Herbst being their next development driver. He witnessed what Sam Mayer did in the Camping World Truck Series race at Dover in the 57 for Henderson Motorsports. Sam Mayer's already signed to JRM in the Xfinity Series for later this year once he turns 18 years old, and will run there in 2022. But for Tony Stewart to try and work with him to fill in Sam Mayer's latter season Truck Series races, once he turns 18, he'll be able to run the speedways because Henderson can't afford the 57 for all those races. Tony Stewart is thinking about picking up the slack and Sam Mayer running 2 entries, running what would likely be a number 14 or something like that for Tony Stewart Racing in quite a few races, and then running the 57 for Henderson Motorsports the rest of the races. So kind of filling in the last half of the schedule with a two-team cycle, kind of like what Austin Cindric did at Penske and Roush back in 2018. But that would more or less solidify the fact that those two teams are going to split, because I don't think Gene Haas would be too happy about Tony Stewart fielding a Chevrolet in the Camping World Truck Series, because Sam Mayer is one of the biggest GM prospects right now and will not go to Ford because he's already signed for the next probably 3 or so years with General Motors. On the subject of Ford, Taylor Gray is set to attempt the Louisville Camping World Truck Series race in the number 17 truck for LGR. After failing to make the race at Dover, he is still trying to make his Camping World Truck Series debut and will attempt it at Louisville. Kyle Busch will run the race in his own number 51 truck, prepping for the NASCAR Cup Series race on Sunday. And speaking of Kyle Busch, Austin Dillon will run the number 3 truck for Anderson Germain Racing, going for the Kyle Busch Bounty Money. Also going for the Bounty at Louisville is the number 29 truck of Brad Keselowski, who will be running that race also in preparation for the NASCAR Cup Series race on that Sunday. The second truck for Phoenix Racing will be making its first appearance at Louisville. James Finch's son, Jake Finch, the super late model prospect right now, will be attempting his first career NASCAR Camping World Truck Series start in the number 5 Phoenix Construction Toyota Tundra. Will Kimmel will attempt his second NASCAR Camping World Truck Series start and his first in 12 seasons at Louisville. As you recall, Bill Kimmel was actually a track champion at Louisville Motor Speedway many, many years ago, so the family has a long-running history at that facility. So Will Kimmel is looking to kind of continue that history as the Truck Series makes their return to the racetrack this weekend. Jesse Love will attempt Sonoma and Phoenix Raceway in the number 50 truck for Bill McAnally Racing, their second truck alongside Derek Kraus. And he will be trying to make his first career NASCAR Camping World Truck Series starts, coming off a fantastic season in the ARCA Menards West Series, becoming their champion last year at Phoenix Raceway. NASCAR announces that the defending Xfinity Series and Camping World Truck Series champions are invited to participate into NASCAR's All-Star Race at the Las Vegas Motor Speedway. They will not have to try to make their way in through the open. They have guaranteed starting positions by being the defending champions in their respective series. Austin Cindric moved to the NASCAR Cup Series this year to drive for the Wood Brothers in the number 21 car. So he is locked in and will not have to compete in the All-Star Open to make the race. Sheldon Creed drives for GMS Racing in NASCAR's Camping World Truck Series, and they field a Cup car for Tyler Ankrum on a full-time basis. They will be running the All-Star race with the number 25 car for Sheldon Creed. Sponsor and paint scheme are not announced at the moment. As you recall, they ran the number 25 with Jamie McMurray in the Daytona 500. Had a good run going there for a while. But Sheldon Creed, Austin Cindric will both be participating in the All-Star race, going for the $1 million at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. And now, after just a quick commercial break, we'll be going over my personal favorite segment, the Q&A segment, where I answer sent-in questions from fans just like you, and we will see you in just a moment after these few messages from our partners. NASCAR on Speed Station is being brought to you by RFJ, the official home of the RFJ AI series, by Knife Friend 725, the brains behind Project Retroval, and by Anthony's Online Simulation League. Hello everyone, welcome back to Post Tech. On to the Q&A segment. Absolute favorite part of the show. We get to talk about all the interesting concepts you fans sent in and asked me about, to see whether or not they're going to actually happen, possibilities of it happening, talks within teams, all that sort of good details. And now, let's get on to it. From Newmy Boy, and once again, I apologize if I mispronounce any names or handles. I'm guaranteed to do so all throughout this segment. What is the weather for the next round, that being Louisville Speedway? The weather expected, because they're both night races, is going to be right around 65 degrees. Once the drop of the green flag. As we'll race farther into the night, it'll probably get around to 60 or so degrees. Cloud cover expected, and cool track conditions with a whole lot of grip. Goodyear's bringing a pretty good tire there. They're not bringing a hard tire, though, so expect some tire fall off in the track to rubber in with a bit of a softer tire, but that helps with grip, because it's going to be a very short race, short track racing at its finest, a racetrack under half a mile. It's the shortest track on the schedule. Expect good racing over the course of those two races at the Louisville Motor Speedway. From Todoroki, how is progress on the TRD Speedway? As I mentioned before, Toyota's looking into sponsoring Kentucky Speedway for the 2022 season to bring that racetrack back on to NASCAR's Cup Series schedule. This year it will be used for next-gen car testing, along with Chicagoland Speedway, which they left off the schedule for this year as well. So right now it's still a rumor whether or not Toyota wants to join. It's still a big rumor. It looks like they will likely be doing it. But right now, progress on the TRD Speedway, or whether or not it becomes Toyota Speedway or TRD Speedway, we don't know that for the moment. But the talks are ongoing, and the talks seem to be very positive between both SMI, Bruton and Marcus Smith's company, and Toyota over getting this sponsorship deal happening and Cup Series races back at the Speedway. Although I would not expect Louisville to be dropped off the schedule because it's the shortest track on the schedule. It's the most short track, grassroots-style racetrack that we have on the Cup Series schedule. It is a crucial part of NASCAR racing, having that grassroots asphalt-style racing. What I want to see next year, though, is a grassroots dirt track on the schedule to really complete the cycle. Because we have a club circuit, Palm Beach, on the schedule, kind of giving our support to local road courses. We kind of have a local short track on the schedule now from Louisville. We need a local dirt track. That's just my opinion, but I figure I might as well share it since this is more or less my take on these questions. Also, from Todoroki, will the next-gen car introduce the Toyota Supra? So, honestly, I think that Toyota is still committed to the Toyota Camry. They've ran that car since 2007. It's the longest-lasting make and car combination in the Cup Series. I don't really see that changing. Personally, I would like to see the Supra running, just to see, it make Cup kind of into this battle of pony cars, I guess you could say. The Camaro, the Mustang, and the Supra, and then maybe the Challenger if Dodge decides to join in, because that's been a gigantic rumor, which has to do with the next question. But I would still expect Toyota to show up with the Camry, going off of the way that they market their Cup Series program and just similarities in equipment, because we have to remember that the Toyota Supra is actually an inline V6 engine. That's, not exactly NASCAR Cup Series style, even knowing that, that car is already in the Xfinity Series. I don't really understand why it would be a V8 carbureted Toyota Supra. That's my only problem with the term stock car racing still being used, because the Xfinity Series Supra is carbureted and has a V8. So it's not very similar to the one you would buy for road use, but I would still expect the Camry to be the Cup Series car next year. Personally want to see the Supra, but I don't really have control over that. From Brian 010810, I don't know the order of the numbers that you use there, but is there any new manufacturers in talks next year? Obviously Chrysler, through Dodge, biggest rumor, probably every single year, every single day. Dodge gonna join, yes or no? It's been that way since the 80s, since they left the first. It's been that way since the 60s when NASCAR banned the Hemi. Will Dodge come back? Will Chrysler come back then? When are they going to come back? Then, there was rumors of them leaving when they banned the Superbird and the Daytona. Then there was, when Chrysler left in the early 1980s. Then there was when they tried to get back into ARCA, which they hoped to make a program into Cup, which didn't work out. Then there was... Finally, they come into the Truck Series with the Dodge Ram truck. They get back to Cup in 2001, then they leave in 2012. So, obviously, Dodge is the #1 candidate for coming back. I don't know what teams exactly they would go with. Probably one of the lower-end teams, try to build them up. I don't think Stewart-Evernham is going to be a deal with Dodge. I think it's going to be a deal with Chevrolet if that happens. I don't see Haas CNC leaving Ford anytime soon either. That's also one of the decisions I don't think Tony Stewart was a fan of, was switching to Ford after how much GM did for him. You recall how upset he was driving for Toyota with JGR, left Joe Gibbs after one season driving a Toyota. He was that frustrated, and also with the performance of the Toyotas that year. But, like I mentioned in the last part, Chip Ganassi Racing is a very, very much a flip-flop team. I would not be too surprised to see them running Dodge next year if Dodge shows back up. Ford has a big deal with Team Penske, so I do not see Roger switching manufacturers back to Dodge anytime soon. Neither do I really see anybody else, because even knowing that a manufacturer switch would probably benefit Jack Roush, Ford has done way too much for him, and he's too much of a loyalist to leave that manufacturer. So to truly answer your question, watch out for Dodge. And Honda, I don't think is too interested. They have too much going on with their Acuras and IMSA and their Hondas in the NTT Data IndyCar Series. From Switchblade, 2 questions. Number 1, with the rumored Stewart-Evernham team, are they looking at a development program in Xfinity/Trucks? Yes, with the whole Tony Stewart Racing thing going on with Sam Mayer, I'm sure that's the first little indications of Tony Stewart wanting to build some drivers up. Obviously, Sam is signed to JRM, but that might be part of the development deal, because if you recall, right now, actually, Stewart-Haas's development program goes through, and I hope I pronounce this right, Biaggi Den Beste. I don't think I'm saying that right, but they've been longtime team owners in NASCAR's, back then, Busch Series. They had a bit of a time where they left the sport, came back with Ford in 2012, I believe it was. Now they're working with Stewart-Haas Racing to develop Riley Herbst, which is another decision that Stewart isn't too happy with. But with the whole Sam Mayer deal going on, they're probably going to use JRM as a development outlet like they did with Cole Custer in the Camping World Truck Series to try and move Sam Mayer through the levels of the lower divisions. It wouldn't be with Haas money, but it would be potentially through KHI, Kevin Harvick's management company, because Harvick would still be with Stewart. And they could possibly promote Sam Mayer as, who knows, maybe even Kevin Harvick's replacement. This could be a very logical progression for Sam Mayer as they work with him through GM, if they actually plan on doing this. And I could genuinely see this happening. And now, number 2, have any teams been linked to Martin Truex Jr. if he leaves JGR? And if Truex does, who will replace him in the number 19? So teams linked to Martin Truex Jr. if he leaves. One of them is potentially Gene Haas. But if they split, I can't really see Martin wanting to go to what would I believe be the 10 car, because like I've mentioned before, Almirola kind of wants to leave the team as well. Honestly, Roger Penske should probably think about Martin Truex Jr. because he still has the talent. They have absolutely no chemistry within the number 19 team. I don't genuinely know what's going on with that organization after winning 6 races in 2019, but then they got eliminated in the first round of the playoffs. And the last 2 years, they've only won at Dover. So they need to get that ship righted. Otherwise, Harrison Burton, I personally believe, will be the replacement. I don't think Truex really wants to stay with Toyota if he gets forced out of JGR, because he would be kind of forced to a satellite team, Gaunt Brothers. I guess that would kind of be just like him trying to build back up from where he was with Furniture Row. But I don't think at this stage of his career, being on top of the mountain in 2017, he wants to have to do that again. I personally wouldn't. Having to go through all that work, I wouldn't want to have to do it again at age 40-something. So, if he wants to stay with Toyota, best chance he has is probably a second car at 2311, because, Denny Hamlin has a lot of confidence in him. But I honestly think that if he wants to stay competitive and doesn't just want to hang up the helmet at the end of the year, if he has to leave the number 19 car, I personally think he should go to a different manufacturer. Who knows, that number 3 car at Richard Childress Racing might be open after Austin Dillon could potentially go to Tony Stewart and Ray Evernham's program. Like I've mentioned before, it would not be the number 3. It needs to be an Earnhardt or Childress family member for them to run the number 3 car. It'd be 30 or 31, something like that. But Truex could potentially be looking at RCR as an opportunity, going off of how good that 3 car has been running this year, up into the top 10 in the point standings. From Colin McCoy, who is the early championship favorite? That's a really good question because, Kevin Harvick runs up front for almost 90% of the regular season every single year. And then normally something happens in the playoffs that, ends up with him not winning the championship. So, Clint Boyer's really, really quick this time of year. He proved in 2019 that you don't need to win too many races to win the championship. He only won 2 races that year. One at the very beginning of the season, one at the very end. And that's all you need to do. You got to make the playoffs, and you got to get through it. You don't even need to win the final race of the year, and back then it was Phoenix. And I believe Boyer finished second to Denny Hamlin, which was enough to win the championship. So right now, honestly, my money's probably on Clint Boyer. I feel like he could end his career on the highest possible note. I really do. Otherwise, in the point standings, we have Denny Hamlin, who still hadn't won a championship, but I tell you what, he is consistent. Even though he had that trouble at Talladega Superspeedway, he dropped out of the point lead. He's 23 points behind Kevin Harvick. I still have a feeling that Harvick's going to choke somehow. Going to lose the advantage that he has right now sometime late in the year. Going to get trapped behind and end up having a bad points finish. So I would say right now, keep your eyes on Denny Hamlin and Clint Boyer. Those two are the fastest cars, I believe, in the garage area every week. From Todoroki, another two-part question. Number one, will we see another big rule change like what we saw with the Grand Standard Rule introduction? Honestly, I kind of doubt seeing as big of a situation going on because that kind of changed NASCAR's whole development system. I've been hearing rumors, honestly, about some sort of program of having ARCA and Xfinity Series combination races, 1 or 2 next season. So that may change the dynamic of the development just a little bit more as well. And on top of that, NASCAR's looking at, the whole next-gen program, and they want to build a purpose-built next-gen dirt car. And that's big news because you know very well that just like running on a road course, with the current Cup cars, running on a dirt track especially, even we haven't done that in 51 years. We got the Bristol Dirt Race coming up in a couple months. That's going to be like trying to fit a square into a circular hole. There's going to be so many unknowns. And, the cars aren't really built for that purpose. It's going to be a very interesting race, do not get me wrong. But, it's asphalt stock cars on dirt. So the Dallara, 5-star, all those guys are looking at trying to build a next-gen car for the purpose of dirt racing. Because Dallara is going to manufacture all the chassis next year. They're going to take that out of being an in-house idea, concept, and program that the Cup Series teams use at the moment. No more buying off Joe Gibbs that fancy Toyota chassis or Rick Hendrick the fancy Chevrolet chassis. No more of that. It's going to be just buy off Dallara. They'll have it ready for you. Kind of like what, exactly what IndyCar does because they use Dallara chassis. Composite bodies next year from 5-star, so that means they can kind of stylize them however they want, get the aero package perfected because the bodies will just be standardized. So I would say the biggest deal is probably just the whole next-gen car, all the uncertainties with it. Good touring car style road course racing is what I've been hearing we'll likely be seeing next year, but also dirt car style dirt racing. So more or less what Dallara especially, because most of this kind of hangs on their shoulders at being the chassis builder for every car next year. They're trying to focus on getting these cars to run as best as possible week in and week out, taking on all the independent challenges of NASCAR's diverse schedule, because next year we might run at every single type of track. If that whole Daytona Beach race goes good in the NASCAR Camping World Truck Series this year, expect, the next-gen car to be running in sand. We could be running on every single track type with street circuits and stuff like that coming into play next year, more dirt racing. Dallara's got a lot to deal with for next season. Number 2. So now we know there are talks of a NASCAR Goes North tour with Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. Hope I said that right. Mosport / Canadian Tire and Exhibition Place in Toronto, which is the IndyCar street circuit. Will we see a Mexican track such as El Dorado Speedway or Autodromo or Manos Rodriguez in Mexico, which NASCAR's Busch Series used to run at, on the road course? So I would say my money, personally, is on Mosport coming onto the schedule for Cup Series competition next year. Either Mosport or Toronto, I believe, are the top 2 candidates because they could kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone running at Toronto. Well, 3, actually. They could have an IndyCar doubleheader with NASCAR. They could run a NASCAR Cup Series north of the border, and they could also run NASCAR Cup Series race on a street circuit. So it would kind of perfect everything running a race up there. But Mosport is a fantastic road course, and I would be kind of disappointed to see it not on the schedule. And so is the F1 circuit, Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. But I would say that it's kind of low priority in comparison to either Canadian Tire or Exhibition Place. When it comes to a race in Mexico, I think that would be a really, really cool idea because of NASCAR's Peak Mexico Series. Getting a race down there, we'd have a bunch of ringers coming out because they're familiar with the racetrack. So it would be a very interesting dynamic to see locals coming out to race with the Cup Stars, probably putting together one car to run the race. Hopefully we see that if NASCAR runs in Canada too. Maybe some Pinty Series drivers coming out to run that race as well. Speaking of a Pinty Series driver also, DJ Kennington's going to run the upcoming Camping World Truck Series race at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park for Jordan Jordan Anderson and Germain Racing, their number 3 truck. That's going to be much later in the year in the playoffs. But I digress. NASCAR is certainly looking at going north or south of the border, potentially both, just trying to kind of combine all of their series in some way or another. Because when you think about it, Cup should kind of be a combination of every single development series that drivers go through to get up to the top level. So I would even potentially say expect maybe an ARCA racetrack to be on the schedule next year. You know, a very unique one like, say, Toledo or Winchester, something like that, to try and have a Cup Series race at every single development staple, climbing the ladder up to the top level. I personally, I'd like to see a race in Europe. I don't think it's going to happen due to cost concerns. You know, we've talked before about, you know, the potential of going back to maybe Suzuka or Twin Ring, running a race, you know, across the pond, either pond, you know, Pacific or Atlantic Oceans. But the cost is really extensive, trying to haul a full field, you know, essentially half the Earth around. Going to Mexico or Canada, you can drive there. You can drive your haulers straight there. But the whole cost of flying your teams in, you know, getting your race cars on the ships, it's really expensive. And that's why quite a few big-name teams didn't even show up to the races in Japan years ago. And even though that was the late 90s, you know, the amount of money teams have now is a lot different. They have a whole lot more funding than they did back then. I still think that a lot of the smaller teams would struggle getting there, and I would expect a field of about probably like 27 or so full-timers, with the rest potentially being locals, like what happened in Japan years ago from 96 to 98. If we went to Europe, it might be filled with wheel and Euro drivers, which would still, you know, fill in the field, and it'd be great. You know, full field size, but we'd be missing probably quite a few of our regular contenders, which I'm not sure if that's what NASCAR exactly wants to do. It'd be a neat dynamic, though, because, you know, dirt ringers show up for the dirt races. We could have Euro ringers showing up for the European races. If we run a race in Japan, we could have drivers from there running there. You know, it's just a dynamic of running in so many different places, making what could potentially be the most diverse North American racing series. From Todoroki, will there be any lower division teams moving up? For example, DGR to Xfinity, ThorSport to Cup, and Venturini to Trucks. So ThorSport to Cup technically has already happened through their partnership with NY Racing. That's why Johnny Sauter is running the 44 car on occasion this year. So that kind of is happening through a partnership. Similar situation with Venturini to Trucks, because they're running with Rackley WAR, you know, Willie Allen's team, with Curtis Sutton. They're running the number 25 truck with a partnership with Bill Venturini. ThorSport's running with NY with a partnership to run the Cup Series program. LGR moving into the Xfinity Series. I could genuinely see that happening if the whole Stewart and Haas situation turns bad, because then there wouldn't be very many Ford teams participating. Because, you know, the Team Penske number 22 is actually being driven by Sam Hornish Jr. this year, because they called him up. They didn't have any other drivers to run the 22 car this season, with Austin Cindric moving up to the Cup level. So Sam Hornish is driving their 22, so that's not a development program. He's already established, and you know, he's kind of had his career already happen in a way. And Riley Herbst running the number 98 for Ford in the Xfinity Series. So that development isn't really going very well, to be honest with you. So I would genuinely expect LGR to probably put together an Xfinity Series car in the coming years, whether it be for Haley Deegan or Tanner Gray. Don't really know so far. Maybe both. You know, if Taylor Gray starts to get some good runs together, one of those two could move into the Xfinity Series. Taylor Gray could take over one of the rides in the Camping World Truck Series. They will certainly be looking at it with that funding coming from Ford if they can get their ducks in a row on the Camping World Truck Series side. LGR's had a pretty decent run on the Cup Series side this year. They're not in the top 20 in points, but it's still early in the season, so they could still get that ship righted. But it's been a bit of a rough start for LGR in both divisions that they participate in. So I would say maybe wait until the end of the year if Larson pulls off another one of those runner-ups in Cup Series point standings, or potentially finally wins the thing. He might finally do that, and that'd be a huge boost in funding to develop their drivers even farther. So, next question from Claustrosphere. Has Dover Motorsports said anything new about changes to the inside wall coming from the pits after recent wrecks involving Timmy Hill in the Camping World Truck Series and Kaz Gralla in NASCAR's Cup Series? It's going to be quite a bit of work, because from what I know, about the reason that wall comes out at such a sharp angle is it surrounds that bridge on the exit of turn number 2. So they either need to get rid of that pedestrian bridge so they can kind of ease out the way that wall pops out so that you don't hit it and slide right back up into traffic, or try and move the pedestrian bridge in a little bit, or kind of turn it, or just flat out move the thing so that they can, slant out that wall a little bit so it's less of a sharp entry. They're still trying to figure it out. They actually have architects working on this project, getting the thing figured out of how to do this and keep safety at a maximum. But they are certainly going to be doing it before we show up to Dover next year. Fortunately, though, this season, with Dover only having one race, they don't have to worry about it until that time next year. So they have plenty of time to work on that project. But they have said in several interviews with Dover Motorsports and their executives that they will be fixing that wall before next year's race. Kaz Grala's wreck especially was too much of a safety concern to let that go. From Todoraki, will there be any chance of renumbering? For example, 88 to 5, 02 to 33, 48 to 25. Let's just say with those particular examples, Brad Keselowski started his now NASCAR Xfinity Series career with JRM in the number 88. So he is going to stick with that number just because it's kind of his historical number with Rick Hendrick. 02 to 33, I don't see that happening because we own the number 33 car. We're in a way with a competitive rivalry with the captain Roger Penske over buying out short tracks. But 02 car may potentially renumber, not to the number 33, but to potentially another number. We don't presently know the situation on that, whether or not they may reopen the 27, which they had that number in what is now the Arca Menard series. They might potentially run that number if Rick Ware Racing decides to kind of consolidate their teams a little bit more and not run that 27 like they did at Talladega with Joey Gase. Even though that was such a great run, they might just bring Gase over to the 52 car. 48 to 25, don't really much see that happening after all the funding that Ally put into the number 48 car in particular. I just personally think that they want to keep that number. They have the connection with Jimmy Johnson. I just think that they want to continue that, especially after the fact that they didn't renumber the number 24 car of William Byron to some other number to not kind of keep that Jeff Gordon symbolism going on. So I think that that's just kind of the mindset that Hendrick Motorsports and their partners are in, is kind of tribute the drivers that made their team what it is. Byron still looking very similar to Jeff Gordon's final few rides. Alex Bowman, I still want to call that 48 car Jimmy Johnson. So I think that that's just kind of the marketing scheme that Hendrick Motorsports is using right now, kind of keeping that tradition going. I personally feel like they should give drivers their own identity with the numbers, and I think they've done a pretty good job with that with Brad Keselowski, returning him to the 88 car. Kind of kept the same feeling as that old Navy paint scheme. Not Old Navy, not that company, but just Navy, and it was in the past. But, I wouldn't much expect too much renumbering going on. Potentially, though, they might reopen the number 5 car just because that number is being used by Levine Family Racing. That was a lease deal. That they're only leasing that number off of Rick Hendrick. They're likely going to switch to the number 59 for their second car if Rick requests to use the number 5 at the end of this year, because the lease goes out to the end of this season. If in 2022 Rick Hendrick wants to run the number 5, that will likely happen, but that will most likely be a 5th car, because I've been hearing rumors that next season we may get rid of the 4-car limit because teams have to make the races on time anyway, so you'd be kind of judging whether or not you want to run the race and whether or not you want to lose the money of not making the race. So you have to apply all those factors into it, and it would actually kind of make it worth it to get rid of the 4-car limit, because you still have to play the risk of, do you want to put that much money into a car that may or may not make the race on time? And even if it does, it might knock out one of your full-time competitors. So I could logically see Rick Hendrick potentially running the number 5 as a part-time or even full-time 5th car next season. 5 for 5, I guess you could call it. From closed captions available, since Jan Magnussen is in NASCAR's Cup Series, is there a chance we could see Kevin do some races in the future? It wouldn't be with our team because of his connections with Chip Ganassi Racing in IMSA. Although I could see Kevin Magnussen running maybe a race or two in NASCAR's Cup level for Chip Ganassi. because they have that additional car for Jimmy Johnson that they ran at Daytona. Johnson is thinking about running North Wilkesboro, which he almost won last season, was beat out in the final lap by Austin Dillon. But Kevin would likely run the Charlotte Roval race, because that race is part of a doubleheader with IMSA, which he will be a part of that race as well. So that would be the most logical schedule decision for Kevin to make if he does, in fact, want to run a Cup Series race. From Claustrosphere, does Matt Crafton have any associate sponsors to appear on the hood of his truck like in previous years, or is Flex Seal going all out with Menards for the entire Truck Series season? So really the way it looks right now is that Flex Seal will be represented on that 88 truck for the full year after they are not really much a sponsor anymore on Johnny Davis's NASCAR Xfinity Series program. They decided to put their logos on Matt Crafton and ThorSport, and I believe personally that they will be committed to that for the full season. It was initially about a 15-race deal, but the way it's been going, I would say that you could expect a Flex Seal family of products to be represented on that number 88 truck for the full season, after especially winning at Dover International Speedway. From Colin McCoy, what teams are off to rough starts in both Cup and Trucks? Is there a possibility at redemption for them? I truly believe that LGR is off to really one of the worst starts of anyone, and also, along with that, Gene Haas's half of Stewart-Haas Racing. I think that there's redemption certainly for Kyle Larson in the NASCAR Cup Series. He'll be climbing his way all throughout the season, back through the points. He won at Sonoma last year, and that race is coming up fairly soon, so maybe he could go 2 in a row at that racetrack. The team doesn't exactly have oval pace, which is why they didn't win the championship last year. They had a shot, but they just got trapped by poor pit strategy and had to race their way back onto the lead lap in the final 20 or so laps, which cost Larson the championship. But possibility of redemption, yes. Certainly, even in the Truck Series side with Haley Deegan and Tanner Gray, with their part-time 17 truck running good also, they could get a win with either Larson or David Reagan throughout the year. Gene Haas's program, honestly, I'm not sure. Eric Almirola normally gets a win, at least 1 or 2 wins at the end of the year. He might be able to do something similar to that. My money's on another plate race win for him, or I guess you could say tapered spacer race now. Just super speedway races, just call them that. Cole Custer, I don't know what that team needs to do, because that team has not been running good whatsoever. The 41 team did not run good in 2020. It's not running good this year. Even knowing that, Cole Custer has a guaranteed ride at that program, the performance just is not there. I don't know what they need to do, but they need to get that ship righted, because Tony Stewart's cars are 1st and 4th in points with the 4 and 14 cars, while Cole Custer and Eric Almirola both set outside of the top 20 in the point standing. So they really need to figure out what they're doing wrong. Maybe they really do need to start sharing notes, because those two teams are total 180 from each other. And I'm genuinely not too sure about a chance of redemption for Cole Custer this year, because things didn't really go very well for them last season. But it's possible, but we just haven't seen any good runs really out of that driver yet in the Cup Series. He ran great in NASCAR's Xfinity Series. Once he got up to the Cup level, things just have seemed to stagnate. Also from Toto Rocky, is there any lower division teams making up divisions? Venturini's obviously, looking at partnering with someone to run a NASCAR Xfinity Series program, whether that be with Michael Self or who really knows. But then again, with the possibility of a common car between Xfinity and ARCA Menard Series next year, it's possible that they might just naturally make their way to the Xfinity Series, since they might just be running the exact same car. But beyond that, not too many lower teams making their way through the ladder up to Cup. Sam Hunt, like I mentioned before, is looking at it. Ryan Sieg might run a race or two as a Ford development car, but not too much going on with the lower divisions. Cup already is pretty crowded. We had 64 cars show up for Daytona, so I think that that's kind of a disincentive at this point to lower division teams trying to come up into the Cup Series as an ownership program, because it's just such a hard thing to make. Already we have Joe Gibbs, Stewart-Haas, Roush Fenway. They're missing races, so your odds as a lower division team are kind of getting harder and harder. I would recommend a lot of lower division teams trying to make their way into the Xfinity Series, because it's a brand new market with the whole ARCA car being similar to it. The potential to make your way into that series and be successful is a lot better, with I guess you could say a lack of competition in comparison to Cup and Truck right now. They had about 42 cars show up for Daytona compared to Truck's 60. trucks and Cup Series having 64. So if you're going to make your way into a higher level, Xfinity right now is the way to go when it comes to cost efficiency and being able to make your way into the series with somewhat success without having to rough it out, kind of like how Furniture Row Racing had to for 10 years. Also from Claustrosphere, hearing the recent rumors involving a potential Carl Edwards one-off race, not runoff, is there any current news about him in talks with other teams? Not too much news about him being in contact with teams in particular. I honestly think it would be more a Sam Hornish situation where a team has to call him. But Carl Edwards throwing that idea out there that he's willing to run a race is really, really intriguing, because he left the sport very abruptly in 2016 after almost winning the championship again. And so, he kind of went out possibly at the peak of his career. I really think he probably would have won the 2017 championship above Martin Truex Jr. had he been there and had he had the inspiration to win it, because at that point you could kind of tell, nobody steps away if they still have the drive to win. You know what I mean? Nobody steps away with the idea of, I want to win a championship. They step away with the idea of, I'm content with what I've done, I don't want to risk it any longer. But if his mindset was in, I want to win a championship, and if he would have went for it, I think he probably could have beat Martin Truex Jr. to it. But Sonoma, Watkins Glen, or a dirt race are his probably top 3 candidates. I wouldn't exactly expect a Carl Edwards one-off this season. I would expect it probably with the next-gen car. Once aero package, the way the car handles, all that stuff changes. He's had enough experience with the Gen 6 car that, honestly, he probably left because he got bored. But at least that's kind of the way he acts about it. But with the whole next-gen car, whole new variables involved in NASCAR Cup Series competition, I think that is what would have to happen to get Carl Edwards interested in running a race, and I would not doubt him doing it. He still has that connection with Toyota, but also if Jack Roush called him, I'm sure he'd probably take that offer too. Ford and Toyota are probably both thinking about how we're going to get this guy. But probably Ford needs him a little bit more to get their teams back on track, in particular Roush, to try and get a experienced and good driver to give them more feedback about what their cars need. That's no offense to Chris Buescher, Ryan Newman, fantastic race car drivers. But what they're doing right now is not really working to progress the team farther back towards the front of the grid, because they're not really running up front where they were in 2019 with Ryan Newman and being race winners. So potentially Carl Edwards could help with that, or he could go with Toyota and possibly win a race. Because, if Edwards goes with Roush, it'd be a development situation like Kenseth did with them in 2018. If Edwards goes with Toyota, maybe Joe Gibbs, once that 4-car limit gets removed for 2022, which seems pretty likely, Edwards, if he makes the race, might just win the thing. He has that talent. I don't know if the extended time being out of the seat, rather, would hurt him too much, because he still has that much talent, and I believe that personally he could still get the job done if given the proper equipment. Now the final question from Jackson Nantle. Hopefully I pronounced your name correctly. Are you at Starcom Speed Station planning on changing your driver lineup for the Cup Series anytime soon? So we actually signed all 4 of our drivers to 3-year deals once we started up this program with our current driver lineup, so that goes all the way out to the end of 2022. We did that on purpose so that we could build this team up with the same group and keep it consistent, so that we could build team chemistry and get things going the way we wanted to have an effective 4-car team, and I believe that's what we've done. Don't expect any changes to our program until at least 2023, because we also want to be ready for the next-gen car, which is why we gave ourselves that 1 year of leeway, just in case the next-gen car did, in fact, get delayed, and then it did. We're not running it this year. We're going to start running it in 2022, so we will be keeping that 4-car program together all the way in to next season, and at the end of next season. 2023 would be the soonest that we would change any driver as part of our lineup. And so that's a wrap of episode number 4 of Post Tech. Hopefully you enjoyed it. The next time you'll be seeing us will be for the Quaker State 400 from Louisville Motor Speedway, as NASCAR takes on their shortest track on the Cup Series schedule at 0.44 miles, just a little bit smaller than Martinsville Speedway, the D-shaped oval where you're almost turning the entire lap. Expect quite a few bent fenders and hurt feelings at that short track. The next episode of Post Tech, we'll be going over 2 Camping World Truck Series races, the race at Louisville, and then the following race at Sonoma, California, as we get back on track and having the Camping World Truck Series races covered before the NASCAR Cup Series races. And that will be at Wednesday, 6 p.m., the consistent time for Post Tech, and we will see you there.